to its natural peace and calm. In today's episode, I'm talking about understanding people-pleasing, balancing self-care, and overcoming anxiety. Now, this topic recently came up in our group coaching membership. We have a Facebook group, and a post came up about this, and it was actually more about empathy. Now, empathy can indeed lead to people-pleasing. So that's what was going through my head when I was answering the post. Because people-pleasing and empathy are really tied together. And the empathy can lead to people-pleasing when it's not balanced with healthy boundaries and self-awareness. People-pleasing is also a topic that comes up often in our one-on-one sessions and on our group Zoom calls. So I know that this is definitely tied with the anxiety tendencies. We can all be reminded to take good care of ourselves by checking in on our boundaries and not falling into old behaviors that may no longer serve us, because that's what people-pleasing could be for you at this point. It could just be an old behavior that surfaces when you're highly stressed. So to be aware of it and actually be working on it as you are moving out and overcoming your anxiety, this can be a wonderful, like a booster rocket to get you out of the wormhole. Because we can get stuck with that kind of not paying enough attention to ourselves. We can be so empathetic, so desiring to please people around us that we don't take enough care of ourselves. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't get out of the anxious wormhole. Now, it may have been important at some point in your life or my life to please those around us. Yes, it could have been a survival mechanism. But now in our lives, we can examine our behaviors and we can decide if they are helping us or they are harming us, and we can actually make changes. So here are some questions that I want you to ask yourself to see if your anxiety is tied somehow to people-pleasing or codependency. First one, do you often find it challenging to decline requests or to set boundaries? Second one, do you frequently agree with others just to avoid conflict? Third, are you overly concerned about how others perceive you? And finally, do you struggle with self-confidence? And if you answered yes to any of these questions, you might want to consider that maybe your empathy and your care for others has crossed the line into being a people pleaser. Now, a people pleaser can also be called a codependent person, prioritizes others' happiness over their own, often at their own expense and discomfort. And you know what discomfort does to the anxious person, right? It just takes us further down the wormhole because we get worried about, why am I so uncomfortable now? We don't even know we're doing these things to ourselves, that we are putting our own self in harm's way. Now, according to Dr. Susan Newman, people pleasers typically go out of their way to ensure those around them are happy. Now, again, like I said earlier, this may have been something you had to do in your life. You know, as humans, we're amazingly brilliant. As a child, you could have learned that by keeping certain people in your life happy kept you safe. That's a scenario that happens. These things come up for all kinds of different reasons. This is not about being angry at yourself or telling yourself you're not very good or you should be better or why didn't you figure it out. No, sometimes that came up to keep you safe. While being empathetic, helpful, and considerate isn't inherently negative, excessive people-pleasing can have detrimental effects. Over time, it can erode one's sense of self-worth, authenticity, and self-esteem. This constant need to please others can lead to internal conflict, feelings of unhappiness, a lack of fulfillment, stress, depression, and anxiety. It's important to recognize that being selfless and helping others are admirable qualities. But when people pleasers consistently neglect their own needs, it becomes unhealthy. Many of our societal influences, such as schools, religious institutions, and cultural norms, promote altruistic behavior, which can be a beautiful way to live life. But for individuals with strong people-pleasing tendencies, the desire for external validation and acceptance can become overwhelming. And contrary to popular belief, being a people pleaser isn't synonymous with being genuinely kind. It often involves suppressing one's own feelings, avoiding confrontation, and agreeing to things they don't genuinely support. This behavior can be confusing to others and ultimately undermines authentic relationships. So here are some common myths that people pleasers often hold. Believing that conforming to others' expectations will make them more likable. Thinking that pleasing everyone will earn universal kindness in return. And assuming that people-pleasing guarantees approval, respect, and acceptance. Now, those are definitely myths. In reality, setting boundaries and expressing genuine thoughts and feelings often garners more respect in the long run, even though it may initially challenge established dynamics. Overcoming our people-pleasing tendencies requires a lot of self-awareness and intentional actions. First off, I want to remind you about self-awareness. Understanding your own thoughts, beliefs, fears, and motivations is crucial. Secondly, I want you to learn to say no. Practice politely declining when you need to prioritize your own well-being. Start small with this, but do practice. Third, delay responses. Take time to consider requests before agreeing or declining, which allows for thoughtful decision-making. And fourth, practice self-love. Embrace self-acceptance and prioritize your own needs without guilt. And fifth, authenticity. Communicate your true opinions and feelings honestly, fostering genuine connections. Like I said earlier, people-pleasing and codependent behaviors can contribute to feelings of anxiety. Constantly prioritizing others' needs and opinions over your own can lead to a persistent sense of unease and stress. The fear of disappointing others or the fear of being judged negatively can create a cycle of anxiety and overthinking in people pleasers. And I think the reverse can be true also. The people pleaser finds themselves becoming anxious. The anxious person can find themselves doing people pleasing, and the people pleaser can find themselves getting anxious. It feeds each other. That's why it can be somewhat difficult to get out of without really taking some action. And the inability to assert boundaries or say no when necessary can lead to feelings of overwhelm and burnout. Always striving to meet unrealistic expectations set by others can perpetuate a sense of inadequacy and anxiety about not measuring up. So you can see how this just keeps churning. It's another cycle. In social situations, the pressure to constantly please can result in heightened anxiety about saying the wrong thing or not being liked. This fear of rejection or criticism can further exacerbate anxiety symptoms, leading to avoidance of conflict or uncomfortable situations. And you can see where that slippery slope is going, right? You stop going places, you stop talking to people. It just becomes a trip down the wormhole. Now, while the intention behind people-pleasing is often to maintain harmony and gain acceptance, the long-term consequences on mental health, including the increased anxiety, highlight the importance of finding a healthy balance between caring for others and prioritizing your own self-care and authenticity. Learning to manage stress associated with people-pleasing involves cultivating self-awareness, practicing assertiveness, and nurturing self-compassion. And I want to say that boldly to you, nurturing self-compassion. So when you do a loving kindness meditation, for an example, or a metta meditation, do as the Buddha instructed and do it for yourself first. Then go on and offer loving kindness to all the others. Even the Buddha knew that this was a problem. We have to take care of ourselves. Now, if you're not familiar with loving kindness or meditation, you may be new to the show. You could go back and listen to episode 574, which is a loving kindness guided meditation that I take you through. Be kind to yourself as you navigate out of these learned and sometimes very, very old behaviors. I want you to remember that valuing yourself and your needs doesn't mean that you're selfish. It's about striking a balance between helping others and maintaining your own well-being. Learning to say no to less important requests can empower you to say yes to what truly matters to you. And the only person who can find this balance is you. You have to experiment, which means you're going to have to put up with a little discomfort in saying no, a little bit of discomfort when presenting your own opinion. That is a good kind of discomfort. That is a discomfort that is stretching you to become more truly who you are, to be someone who can live in their own skin in this chaotic world that we live in. It doesn't mean you're selfish. And I have to say, most of the people that I work with, and I've been doing this for a very long time now, I have talked to a lot of people. They are not selfish people. I have always said this about our group coaching membership, because sometimes people are nervous about, I don't know if I want to post something on Facebook, whatever. Our group, these are the most kind people you've ever met. We have the nicest Facebook group on Facebook. Why? Because most people who are this anxious to be out there trying to get help are also people who are very empathetic, people who feel the world around them. They feel the stress around them. And they are often people that are trying to make everything around them more calm, more peaceful, and everyone to be happy. But what happens? They forget about themselves. And that's the slippery slope. That's where then we become more anxious because we're stressing ourselves by not being authentic. We're stressing ourselves by not saying no when we really need to. Now, this is an ongoing process. I'm working on this all the time too, because some of us are born leaning this way, just like some of us are born leaning a little bit more toward anxiety, a little bit more to the neurotic side of life. That's okay. The world is full of all kinds of different ways to be. But when we are aware that some of our behaviors, if not kept in check, will take us to an uncomfortable place, perhaps even down the wormhole, then we know it is our responsibility to take care of that, to check in, to practice with our self-care, to practice with our setting boundaries. The more we do it, the more comfortable it becomes. I hope today's show was helpful for you. And again, if you haven't done a loving kindness meditation, I hope that you will check out episode 574, where I guide you through that metta meditation. I'll be back before you know it. And now for today's quote. When you say yes to others, make sure you are not saying no to yourself. And that's from Paulo Coelho. I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.